bienvenidos a la Daily Hustle. Soy Enrique Byrnes y presidente de esa mejor cerveza. No Abate por No Filter Network. Miguelito San Dieguito. Will the Thrill not with us as well. But we have a special guest from the, I don't know, San Francisco Chronicle, still, I imagine, the great Susan Slusser. So, Susan, we're going to properly salute our boys who are not here and you, as well as each and every one of our audience members. You ready? Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, yay.
And Susan, hey, you got to remember this. When we're juiceful, we're useful. And when we're juiceless, we're fucking useless. That's it.
I love that. I love that. No Will today. So do I have to be, am I filling in for Will Clark? Oh my gosh, am I considering for Will Clark?
This is you are not technically, because the Thrill, actually, I take that back, you are, because this does get uploaded to the Deuces Wild podcast as well as the Daily Hustle podcast when it goes to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. So, yeah, there's certainly some people that probably tuned in expecting to hear Will the Thrill Clark, and instead they get Susan Slusser. But how are you?
Similar. I mean, I covered Will in for two different teams, and I covered. So I feel like I can handle this assignment. This is one of the great moments of my life, really. Filling in.
Didn't you tell me that Thrill was an asshole one time? Something happened.
Oh, and one time. I love Will. Will really liked to be difficult and annoying. Often would yell parasites out at the media. Jokingly, I presume. Now he's a member of the media almost. He's working with you. I'm gonna give you guys sort of semi-media status. So, how have the tables turned?
I don't know how Thrill would feel about him actually achieving media status.
Yeah, he's gonna have to take it.
So I have a question for you, though.
Yeah,
right off the bat here. So Thrill, really outspoken, obviously is not afraid to share his opinion. We do this show, and then basically what happens is after we record here on No Filter Network, it gets uploaded to 17 different platforms. And then along the way, we have our social media guy. He'll cut up clips, send them out. So there's certain times where there's clips that will go viral and they'll get hundreds of thousands and several actually millions of views. And at the same time, Susan, I don't have a job other than this. Will works for the Giants. You cover the Giants. So I always tell him, I'm like, dude, like, be a little cautious. Like, we're not going to put anything out there. But, like, so, his outgoingness and his willingness to discuss even the internal workings of what's going on in San Francisco. Have you heard anything about any rumblings about Thrill and maybe his exploits and, how open mouthed he could be at times?
Well, I do think that I don't think that the Giants really mind Will speaking. That's how he's always been, right? I mean, you wouldn't want anything less from Will Clark. That's one of the reasons he's on board there as like a special advisor, whatever he is. You do know you'll get the unfiltered truth from Will Clark. I love Will simply just being around the clubhouse. I think he's great for all the young hitters, and I would love to see him freed up even more to work with some of them. Obviously, Bonds is there, working with some young hitters. Will, I mean, that kind of knowledge, plus just the personality, the energy. This is like the all-time most juiced podcast with the two of you. That's off the charts energy level. That's great for Clubhouse too. So yeah, even if he, maybe says something people don't agree with, I don't think the Giants mind. That's Will.
I agree with you. And I obviously, when we first started doing this, I do know he's been called into the principal's office a couple times. And it's kind of like Joe Thrill, like, tone it down. We can't say this, we can't say that. That was really on in this whole thing. But I think you're right, because in the modern day of how they teach baseball, right? And how they teach hitting and how they talk about approach. Obviously, I think the game's changed a little bit, but at the same time, Will has his views. And, look, he's open minded to an extent, but this is a guy that had all sorts of success, being one of the best players in baseball for so long. And he did it his way and he did it with his approach. And so I think it's hard for him now to watch when he sees guys striking out 200 times a year, when he sees a batting order in which maybe you have this big power hitter that clogs the bases hitting first and not fifth. So there's all these different ways, I think to look at the game, but he certainly brings that old school perspective. I think it's important to have because when you go so far fucking one direction, like the Giants did with Gabe Kapler and that whole regime, you need somebody to bring it back, and it's like checks and balances in life, right, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I always love having the idea of having a dissenting voice or more in an organization, right? You don't want just to be surrounded by people that just agree with you. You want somebody pushing back. You don't necessarily, if you're up top, you don't necessarily have to listen, and do everything somebody that's got different ideas wants you to do. But it's good to have those voices. That's Eric, when you were with the A's, when I was covering the A's, that's one of the things I really appreciated most about Billy Beane was he wanted to surround himself with people who would push back. He had the final say, obviously, but he liked having the internal discussion. You found that out. You guys went kind of toe to toe a few times on some things, and I like that, and I think Will relishes that. And if the Giants want somebody to kind of push back and talk about different ways of doing things, that's a guy to look to 100%.
Well, the funny thing is, Susan, and we'll transition to the A's here, but you're right. I did go toe to toe with Billy a couple times, and one of the times, I think we both came out of it smiling and laughing. And eventually I got traded, but I actually don't think that was the reason why I got traded. I think he appreciated, number one, the fact that I wanted to play and I was a competitor. And, number two, I came at him with some information that would be, you know, statistics based and say, look, I understand what you're looking at in the overall numbers, but let's break this down in a shorter period of time and talk about what I've done recently, which would warrant the start, the at bat, whatever it was. I mean, obviously that was a constant struggle for a long time. And to his credit, he was willing to listen. And I got to ask you, because obviously I was just there on Sunday. What an emotional day that was for me. I didn't think it would be emotional at all, but it was. I didn't see Billy. I obviously did not see John Fisher, did not see David Cavall. Where are these guys, and how involved is Billy Beane still even with the A's?
These are all excellent questions. I haven't seen John Fisher or Dave Kaval at games for a while, and I've been out there more. This final season in Oakland, so I've sort of been put a little bit onto some A's coverage because it's important, right? Like final year in Oakland for a storied franchise. So I haven't seen those guys. Haven't been much in contact with them, but Billy I've spoken to a lot. He is around some. Um, his day-to-day involvement, it's sort of switched with David Forst. Billy no longer owns a chunk of the team. I think he divested from the team a while back. I think more when he was starting to focus on some of his European football investments. So he doesn't have that anymore. But it was always used to be Billy and David Force sort of, really on board with the same things, but Billy would make the final call. Now I think David runs stuff past Billy and David has a final call. That's really the only real change. But yeah, he's very much sort of, I wouldn't say daily involvement, but anything major, he's going to have some fingerprints in there for sure.
Whose fault is this? The city of Oakland or the A's?
There's a lot of blame. I'm not going to. Major League Baseball, I think, comes in for some. The Giants come in for some. There are a lot of factors. Some things could have been solved a long time ago. The A's had a nice location picked out in San Jose. Land would have been paid for, infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff. The Giants invoked their territorial rights, as is, they're allowed to do so. Major League Baseball could have stepped in at that point and said, you know what, the way you got these territorial rights was a little bit weird. This is the best site. San Jose is the biggest city in the country without a baseball team. That keeps the A's in the Bay Area. Beautiful site, beautiful weather. I think most people, I think, listening to this, or certainly a lot, are going to know San Jose pretty well and know what a good market it would be. That would have kept them. Oakland, I thought for the longest time, still think the Coliseum is the best site. Just put in a new facility there, redo the current one. That might be tricky because of the below sea level stuff. There's all sorts of issues with maybe just redoing it, but do that right near public transit. I thought that would be good. This ownership group, for some reason, was never in on the Coliseum. That would have been cheaper, much faster, could have done it really without even any major permitting or jumping through hoops. And they focused on Howard Terminal, which some people now think was a red herring to allow them to move elsewhere. I don't know if that's true, but I certainly think that the economic climate changed a lot of thinking about Howard Terminal, both from the ownership group side, because they wouldn't be able to do the full development that they wanted to, and probably from the city side. The city, is hurting post COVID and inflation and all of that, just providing some basic services. So, that when the A's talked about coming back, even just for the 3 years, the city was going to soak them for a lot of that TV money. And I can understand why the A's went like, wait, we're staying there to get this TV money. Now you want to take all of it. That things broke down there. So that's where the city kind of comes into, because the city had kind of gone along with almost all the Howard Terminal stuff. A lot of the major stuff was taken care of. That was a disappointment. They got much further down the line at Howard Terminal than I've ever expected them to. But the second Burnsy, like 4 years ago, when David Cavill started talking about gondolas and stuff, I thought, this is not ever going to work. Too many issues with this, and it didn't.
um, so why would the A's? What is this? 3, 4 years ago, maybe? And I don't even feel like it was that. I feel like it was a couple years ago. Run this massive rooted in Oakland campaign, and
I,
then just I don't know, months later, bail and say that's it. This isn't working.
you know what? Who knows what the original intention was? I was all on board. I think everybody was. Everyone was like, finally, someone gets it. Someone really wants to stay in it. The Raiders were leaving, the Warriors were leaving. Somebody wants to stay, and Libby Schaff, the then mayor, was very into it. The team was into it. That was all wonderful. There were a few missteps. I think they put in new offices in Jack London Square that I think were a massive expense, probably not needed. There was a new Chris Giles came in as the team president. There were a ton of expenditures. I think all of those people are now gone. They were really kind of almost turning into like a tech operation at one point, which, Eric, the A's have always operated best when they're kind of operating on a shoestring. But there was a lot of expenditure and not a ton to show for it. So that was weird. And then the pandemic, inflation, the market for development in the Bay Area, all of those things, I think, kind of combined. I never thought that that was a workable site. It might have been, but I think once John Fisher thought, I can't now do all of the hotels and retail and all of that around the ballpark that I wanted to do because nobody has the money to invest in this. I think that went away. Now, I am not convinced necessarily on Vegas either, but part of this is, I think, a stadium fatigue. I have seen, and you have seen, so many renderings and illustrations, and this is how it's going to look. I still feel like until there is a shovel in the ground, I don't buy any of it. I don't think. I think certainly they've to this point signed everything in Vegas they need to. They've gotten the approvals they need to. They got the MLB owners to approve the move, which I cannot believe, especially the NL West owners voted for this to leave the Giants with this huge and this rich, more important, a territory. That is going to come back to bite some teams in the NL West's butt. But I'm still just not convinced that all of this happens. Even Sacramento's kind of iffy at this point, and that one makes no sense to me. So there are
That's
all
what I
sorts
just
of, yeah, go
I
ahead.
just heard that there's some pushback from the Players Association, and Scott Boras is actually leading the charge where the standards for major league players is not sufficient in Sacramento. And so I don't know if they're trying to have changes done. I don't know if this is legit resistance. I don't know what this would mean because apparently the city of Oakland, the A's are just fucking done.
Well,
And
okay,
I got
this
that.
yeah. Do you want the scoop on this? Because I wrote about this about a week and a half ago.
Yes, please.
So Scott, I talked to Scott and a bunch of agents about this because the Players Association has been taking this sort of wait and see approach. Now, the Players Association, to be clear, has no legal recourse to stop a move. They can oppose a lot of things within it. They can make sure a lot of things things in the CBA are met. Some of those things are going to be impossible to do, but I think legally they can't actually oppose it once the owners didn't vote on the Sacramento thing, but MLB has approved that. But the agents are concerned. The first concern is the artificial turf that's required with two teams sharing a facility. There are going to be games every day, so artificial turf goes in. Byrnes, you certainly know what the weather is like up there. Even the best turf is going to heat up all day in the sun. They've talked about a cooling system. I don't really know how that's going to work, but there are concerns. Turf in general is every study shows you're more likely to get injured on turf. The Giants, who obviously have had a hand in this, I think they're not loving the idea of the River Cats playing on turf and then going and playing on beautiful real grass when they get called up, and also having greater injury risk. So that's an issue. The River Cats are going to be secondary citizens in their own ballpark. That's starting to be an issue. There were a bunch of guys in there when suddenly a wall started being taken out of their weight room. And they were like, why is there a drill coming through the wall? Why is the wall shaking while I'm working out and doing my job? So that's an issue. It's a 14,000 seat stadium. What happens in the playoffs? They haven't guaranteed that that's where so all year the games could be in Sacramento, and then they could be playing somewhere else in the postseason. Aaron Judge could hit a zillion home runs over the course of a series. Fun, right? But it could really, statistically, it's going to be a massive outlier. That's potentially an issue. Smaller park, very hot weather, um, and just amenities. The River Cats moving in and out. Clubhouses are going to be built in the parking lot beyond the outfield for the major leaguers. They're going to have to come in through the outfield, like for spring training. This is for 3, maybe even 4 years. I just don't know if Major League Baseball at a AAA stadium for 3 or 4 years is something that's going to keep flying. There are going to be a lot of agents, a lot of player reps who are complaining. And it's going to be nonstop issues. I think that's going to wind up being a bigger story for longer than anyone realizes.
What about the group of people that firmly believe the A's will have such a positive impact on the Sacramento community that Sacramento then steps up? I do know they originally built that stadium with the potential to add a major league team to that city. What are the possibilities do you think that actually could happen?
I think there's all sorts of possibilities. First of all, I should have mentioned. So, when talks broke down with the A's coming back to Oakland for 3 or 4 years, that was with the city of Oakland. The Coliseum is now fully owned by AASEG, which is the group that bought the A's half of the Coliseum and then is completing the sale from the city's half of the Coliseum. There's no reason the A's can't then go back to AASEG and say, what are your terms? And I think once the sale is completed, right now it's just, I think, mere legalities. I think they can go back. What they do with Sacramento, what promises have been made, money is spent, who knows? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it's a possibility. And then at least you have a big league facility. Um, Sacramento. I think Sacramento would like to show at the very least it's potentially an appropriate spot for expansion, which I believe. I spent 6 years in Sacramento. I love Sacramento. I think night baseball in a baseball facility, a major league baseball facility, I think would be wonderful. They did build Sutter Health Park with the potential for expansion. Now, I covered the Rangers. Well, I covered the A's when the Rangers were still playing at the old Arlington Stadium, which is a minor league stadium that got added onto. I think it got added onto twice. It was still not an adequate big league facility. We'll remember that. Obviously, they then got their beautiful first stadium, and now they're on to their third stadium, which that makes A's fans, I think, want to pull their hair out that they're on stadium number 3 since the Coliseum's been around. But uh,
Them in Atlanta.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, isn't that's unbelievably irritating? But I think that minor league stadiums that get added onto, they're just not quite right. It'd be fine, but that
Yeah.
would be a while too to get that done. And where do they play in the meantime, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, if the Vegas thing falls through and the A's are playing in Sacramento, I 100% expect that Sacramento, the Kings ownership, I think all of that would be trying to make everyone understand that Sacramento would be then the best option for the A's. And they'd have the first dibs if the A's are in fact playing there at that point.
Why does everybody keep telling me that this Vegas thing's going to fall through? Like, it seems like Vegas came out. They said, "Hey, the A's are coming. They're blowing up the Tropicana." I, I don't. Where's right? The owners voted for it. It's happening. Why do people think it's not happening?
Well, I think some of it is just the fact that nothing that the A's ownership has said or done for a long time seems to happen. They seem able to trip over themselves at every turn. So that's some of it. Some of it is A's relocation fatigue. We've been hearing about this for 20 years and nothing's
Yeah.
really happened. Some of it is financing. John Fisher told me when we spoke right before the season, he said they were still looking for investors. Now, they walked that back over the next week and said, oh, no, 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 we've got enough money. Well, it then turns out that they have applied to get more investment for that project. They still don't have it. They're still talking about trying to get investors in Vegas on board for, I think, 350, 400 million of it. That's not insignificant. So I do think that there are funding potential issues. There was some opposition from a teachers group, which has just been struck down, I think, for a second time. So that doesn't seem like a thing. But there's also Bally's, which owns that property and which is blowing up the Tropicana. The original A's stadium design was supposed to go sort of right on the corner there, beautiful location, where the renderings are kind of showing that it would be.
Mhm.
Ballas is like, nah, that's not where we think the stadium's going on this property. We think it's going on the back of the property, and they don't have their final plans for the resort they're putting in. They don't have those done, so there's still sort of issues about the site and where things go on the site that have to get nailed down too. So you start hearing a few of those things after a million years of covering where the A is going to go, and you go like, oh, okay, well this one's not 100% either, and it's not. Yeah, I mean seriously, Eric, get back to me when there are shovels in the dirt. Even then, I might be a little skeptical. I want to see a lot of shuttles and shovels. I want to see a lot of dirt movers. I want to see like I don't know foundations being poured before I believe any of this.
With the valuations of sports franchises recently, I just can't believe that there would ever be any funding issues. Basically, the NFL just came out and said that they're going to be able to sell off portions of their team. I, I mean, even the lowest valued franchises in Major League Baseball, I got to believe, I mean, we're in the billions, right? In like multiple billions now. So, for them to leverage that, I got to think this is going to happen. Now, how soon it's going to happen, who knows? Where I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, if the A's can go to Sacramento, and Major League Baseball does have to figure that shit out with the Players Association. Like you said, they're not going to be able to block a move, but at the same time, you want to make it a pleasurable experience where the players are like, "Hey, I look forward to going to SAC." And if you're an offensive player, like you said, the ball's going to fly a little bit better. I played there. All these guys have gone through the minor leagues. It's not that bad, especially when you play night games. You can't play a day game in the middle of summer. You just, I just it's ridiculous. So, but you do if you're able to play this night game. How this works with the River Cats, I have no fucking idea. I don't really care, and I don't think the A's really care. The Giants could. Yeah, I, I love the Giants, right? Like, and I, I even some dear friends within the ownership group. But at some point, you got to look at it and say, get the fuck out of the way. Like, we have to figure out what's right for this organization. You have to do what's best for Major League Baseball. So the River Cats can go ahead and beat the second class citizens. I really like to see. I mean, if you were asking me, best case scenario, so long as the A's are going to be out of Oakland, I would love to see them stay in Sac. I would love to see them build an appropriate major league facility in Sac. You're right. I don't think it is Sutter Health Park. Um, I think maybe some sort of retractable roof, indoor stadium, something where you can play day games, as well. And I think that you have between Sacramento, it's just you have that whole Central Valley too, man. Like you're not that far from the Bay Area. I go back and forth. I from a very selfish standpoint, am excited about Sacramento just for the fact that I get my car and I'm there in an hour and a half. I'm going to do everything I can to go to as many games as possible. But then I think if Vegas they go ahead with their plans and everything, then it could be the expansion team that ends up going to Vegas, and then the A's stay in Sac. I love the NorCal thing with the A's, and I'd love to try to hold on to that. Look, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. They go to Vegas. I'll continue to support, the organization. It's just, yeah, they've been to Philadelphia, to Kansas City, to Oakland, and now who knows? But yeah, it's fascinating. Is John Fisher the most hated person in the history of Bay Area athletics?
Wow, that's a good question. There have been, I think there are a lot of possible answers. Nobody likes an owner who moves a team, and a few owners have done that here. But Al Davis, moved the Raiders twice, but those teams won, and people, there's a lot of love for a winner. John Fisher is doing it and is a guy who didn't spend money on some good teams, teams that had a real shot. And in fact, did the opposite, traded tons of good players, raised ticket prices, basically did everything wrong from a PR perspective. So, yeah, he's got to be considered. Charlie Finley, obviously, when he started selling off all of those great A's players, I think he was very vilified. And the players also hated him. So he's got to be in contention. But right now, I think John Fisher's the leader in your clubhouse.
How do they get out of this? Like, how do they, if you're John Fisher and the whole sell movement, here's my thought on the sell movement is I get it. Okay, if John Fisher were to sell the team, the owner of the team, the new owner, most likely is going to do the same thing unless they can come up with this sweetheart deal with the city of Oakland. They're fucking out of here. Whether
No,
it's Sac, whether it's Vegas, it's somewhere else. So when everyone's like, sell, I'm like, look, you could sell all you want, but this still doesn't change the fact that Oakland hasn't gotten them a fucking stadium, or the A's haven't, built themselves a stadium within that region in 24 years since they were talking about this shit when I first started playing with the A's.
that's okay, valid. But how did the Giants get their stadium? They paid for it themselves.
Yeah.
Oakland is not in a position to pay for a stadium.
Yeah.
Now, again, the Coliseum site it now has new ownership. If Joe Lacob has many times said he would love to buy the A's, he would have put in a new baseball only stadium at the Coliseum, had the arena next door for other things, obviously the Warriors going across, but that would have been ideal. Would have spent money on the team. Which that's like they're like, well, we're not drawing in Oakland. Yeah, because you're trading all the best players and you're not spending on the team. The A's draw when they're good, like most teams. And then, they point around the country to other teams like, oh, if you're Cleveland's drawing. Yeah, Cleveland draws when they win. That's most places. So I don't think it's necessarily on Oakland. I think you sell to an owner who will fund his own stadium and work with a city or the existing owners of wherever to get something done. There are numerous groups that have tried to step up in Oakland and buy the A's and keep the A's in Oakland and build a stadium. I think this was the wrong ownership. I think Bud Selig, partly because Lou Wolf was part of this ownership group. Bud Selig chose this ownership group, and the A's firmly expected at that point that Selig was going to help them either with a move to San Jose, and they felt like they had the votes to get that territorial thing overturned and get something done in San Jose, or something in Oakland. And then that wound up not being the case. So a lot of this is on Bud Selig. Think this was not the right ownership group. There were a lot of people that wanted to really invest in Oakland. Dave Stewart was part of a group. Reggie Jackson was part of a group. I think that this was a big misstep with this ownership. So I understand the sell movement. The problem with any sort of things like protests and sell is a lot of times you just make people dig in deeper. It's like this, the whole country is divided kind of thing. Yeah, people now just sort of like double down on whatever their position is. And it's gotten kind of ugly behind the scenes. I think the ownership group is like, well, look, we spent a ton of money to try to stay there. You can argue that maybe some of that was a little bit of a red herring, and maybe they thought, oh, we're not really going to do this. They did keep talking about the Coliseum as plan B for a while. What happened to that? Why is that no longer plan B? So there's definitely some BS, but they can legit say, hey, we spent like $100 million trying to stay, and all you guys do is complain. We're out of here. I can see that, but I think you have a bigger responsibility overall to the community when you buy a team to make your best effort there and to stay there. And if you're not going to stay there, to sell to a group that will. I think you have that commitment. When you buy a team, you are buying into the community, and they are giving up on a community they were supposed to be investing in. They're doing the opposite.
Well, why doesn't John Fisher just sell then? Why
That's a great question.
he can't be waking up every single morning going, "Oh, hey, great day to be alive. Let's go get." Like he can't even show up his own fucking ballpark. He's had
He'd
threats
make a
of
ton if he
vandalism.
sold them too. Why not do it? This can't. You're right. It can't be fun. Maybe he's just digging in. Maybe he wants to get a stadium somewhere and then sell because it's even more valuable. Who knows?
Okay.
Major League Baseball has kind of backed the wrong thing here, I think.
What happened to Lou Wolf?
He got kind of pushed out unceremoniously. His son is still a part of the group. I think Lou is a little bit behind the scenes, but Lou is very clear. Lou would have built at the Coliseum cheaper,
Yeah, Lou's a big
faster.
developer, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the thing.
yeah. He was all for that. And I will tell you, this AASEG, they will do something with that whole area and make it much. I've been saying for years, you're right next to BART. You're near the airport.
Right
Somebody
next to
goes
the
in
airport.
and goes do it right, freeway, all of that. If somebody goes in and develops that well, it will be like that area of Emeryville that used to just be warehouses and, kind of nothing. Pixar went in, a lot of developers went in. That is super fancy stores and outlets and food courts and stuff. Somebody could do that right there, and it's in a really busy stretch. That's ripe for development. So somebody's going to do a nice job there, and I think it's an opportunity missed for the people that could have done it.
So when I heard that Joe Lacob had interest in buying the A's, I actually reached out to him
Hmm.
and I told him that if this does come to fruition, I would love to be involved monetarily. Uh, whether it's in the process of developing or building out the organization from any standpoint, however I could help, I would love to help. But it wasn't just with, you know, being a face of a friend. Like, no, I'm interested in actually, the sitting in on the meetings and talking about all the big things and everything else. And I was willing to put my own personal money behind it, to be a part of it. And it was cool. He got back to me right away. And he's like, Eric, hey, look, if as far as I know, the A's are not for sale. If they do come for sale, I will reach out and would love to have you a part of this. And this was 10 years ago though, so
Let's
I
make it happen. I would love to cover you as part of an ownership group, Eric.
oh,
I'll
it'd
have
be
to be
cool.
nice to you though.
It'd be
Yeah.
cool. I'd be it'd be in my opinion, I think like those board meetings and when a lot of these big decisions are made, just from an overall philosophical standpoint and stuff like that's fascinating to me. Like to be able to, at least have input on gigantic decisions that, can determine the success or fate of an organization. So I walked in on Sunday and parked in the F lot. I had a buddy of mine, Ryan Griffin, that actually I coach baseball with, and he's a diehard A's fan, like old school A's, right? And he's been really distraught by the whole fact that they're moving, and he even lives in the Sacramento area. That's the irony of all of this. But he showed up. I'm like, yo, come, bring Miles. His kid plays on our Let Them Play team. He shows up. He had a fucking cell shirt on. And he's going to be my shadow like through the whole day. We're sitting in Caval's suite. I'm like, dude, you can't wear that. And then Deetra sees him and she's like, he with you? I go, not anymore, no. And so he actually ended up to take the cell shirt off and everything else. So anyway, the point I was actually getting to, I wanted to tell you that story, but I walked into center field and I walked through and I saw Clay out there just, my heart hurts for him because obviously he, being the ground crew guy, his job's done.
Yeah.
But I walked through center field and I'm not sure I've ever seen the grass look so beautiful. The dirt just impeccable to every last little, thing. And I came in and I took my cell phone out and I did like this 360 of the Coliseum. And I got to tell you, it's fucking beautiful.
It is.
Talk all the shit you want, say whatever you want. I don't care. It is so gosh damn beautiful. And it hit me and it's like the chills engulfed my body. And then I walked by center field and then left field. And I got my kid with me. I'm like, yo, bro, daddy used to work out here. And I was just I was really taken aback by how awesome it was. And I was really nervous because I didn't want to go back to the Coliseum. I really didn't. And I didn't want to because I wanted to remember the Coliseum the way it was when I played. And I wanted to remember the 50 plus thousand fans that we would get, whether it was a playoff game, whether it was against the Giants. I want to remember the 20-game win streak. I want to remember the diving catches. I want to remember the walk-off homer I had against Minnesota. Like, I want to remember it and be in this really cool, special place. And my fear was I was going to go back there and it is everything that I now see basically portrayed through the media where there's fucking rats running around and there's shit everywhere and the place sucks and the people are grumpy and there's fight. It is every, and then I get by the dugout and I see Kotze and I see Bobby Crosby and I see Eric Martin and I see Mike Eldreddy. And now I'm sitting on the bench with these guys and we're talking shop and just bullshit. And then behind the thing there is Dallas Braden and there's Adam Rosales, and we go out and we throw the first pitch and everyone says like nobody goes to these games anymore. And I swear to you, when we went out there, it felt like there was fucking 30,000 people in the stands. And I, it was electric and the field was beautiful and Clay was there and he scoops up some dirt for me and he puts it in a little capsule like go Byrnesy and a hug, and Z-Man's still fucking on his camera doing his thing. Byrnesy, the Grateful Dead, 1969. I smoked a fucking blunt with Jerry Garcia. Oh, it was crazy. I mean, just going over all this stuff and all these things. And I walked out of there. I'm like, this place isn't dead. It's as alive as I've ever fucking seen it. And